Let's explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
Greetings and salutations to everybody watching for this week's episode of Breaking History. Gordon, how are you doing, my man? It's been a long time, a whole 7 days.
I know, but it feels like a lifetime these days. I'm great, Matt. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm in Mexico right now.
Oh, are you? Okay, I didn't pick up on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where in Mexico, if you feel comfortable disclosing your location?
Yeah, it's like an hour below Tijuana. So we had a few friends, a little expat community here, and basically I was digging snow out of my car for the 18th time this winter, and I was like, let's take them up on this offer that's been hanging over my head for a while. And Cynthia and I said, okay, yeah, let's escape Canadian ice age and do an event or two. So we're going to do a couple of events, one on cultural warfare, another one on geopolitical history, and we took the opportunity to do it in Tijuana. So yeah, it's going to be for 3 weeks. And by the way, if anybody's watching in or near Tijuana, write to us and you can come to some events. They're free. So just throwing that out there.
That's awesome. So just to be clear, you're not there as part of like anti-cartel like operations. I mean, like, because I went to the Caribbean. I happened to go to the Caribbean the day that Maduro was arrested, and I had to disavow any affiliation with that op. But you're not involved in any sort of ground-based land operations in Mexico against the cartel.
Not that I know of.
Okay,
but I couldn't tell you if I was, right? So, but I don't think I am. No.
Good. Well, I'm jealous. I'm jealous because we still have a lot of. I mean, it's like ice here. It sleeted here like 10 days ago, and the sleet. It was like 8 inches of sleet. And for those who don't understand the distinction, it's like grains of sand. Like imagine like picking up sand and it like runs through your fingers. Yeah. Well, it's not even heavy. It's not wet at all. So it's totally dry. So it just like goes through your fingers the same way sand would, but it's like ice grains. But so like it doesn't stick to the trees, doesn't stick to the leaves or anything. Which is kind of nice. Like the first time you got and play with it, like the day of with your kids, it was fun. But then that night it just all froze, which I did not expect that to happen. And so it froze into like a hardened like ice rink. And so it's just been like an ice rink everywhere. Like my driveway, I was able to dig out a little bit, but the rest of the driveway, ice rink, road has been an ice rink. The kids have been out of school for like 10 days. It's been a nightmare. So
not for your kids though. I'm sure they're having a blast.
Actually, surprisingly, my daughter who's in first grade is like banging her head against the wall. She's like crying because she misses school. She's like, I want to go back to school and like see my friends.
Whoa, that's an anomaly right there. Okay,
I know.
I did not expect that.
That's how bad it's gotten. It's like my other two in preschool have gotten to go back, but the public schools are still out.
Well, we got some interesting things to touch upon. I know that I woke up this morning. I read your write-ups on, and a couple of them really blew my mind. Especially your deep dive on Credit Suisse. And I know for people who are going to be watching your show today at 2:00, you're going to have a lot to say about that. But I'm going to have a few questions about some of your findings on the Credit Suisse front and some of the goings on behind the scenes pertaining to the potential purging of the banking system of a lot of its toxicity. So we'll see where that goes, but I'd love to get your take. More importantly, we should probably do a quick disclaimer because we did promise a bigger sharing of our findings last week at the end of last week's show, where we did a sort of thumbnail sketch on the topography, the historical dynamics shaping China and the battles against the Chinese deep state, and specifically the purges of a couple of very high-level generals over, I think, 9 days ago or so. And we promised people that we would have a more thorough assessment. Unfortunately, I'll speak on my part. I did reach out to a number of my friends in China who have a pretty good finger on the pulse, and they reported back to me with they're not really too sure. It took the Chinese government itself about 6 days to officially comment or provide a narrative openly that they were comfortable with about what was going on. Basically corruption is not going to be tolerated. Probably true. Probably also a half-truth and betraying a deeper story that, again, I don't know how to zero in on that. I don't know if that's something you as well feel comfortable maybe sharing a thought or two, or did you pick up on anything useful?
Well, so like that in of itself, like the fact that you reached out to your friends who, like as you said, like the whole reason we didn't talk about it in depth last week was just because you said, "Hey, let me do some research, let me talk to some people, let me try to get my bearings on this so we can have a more sophisticated conversation about it," which I totally respect. I think that's a great approach. The fact that they are also just completely confused about this, I think that's like a microcosm of the macrocosm that we're living in right now. That is the fog of war that I was even writing about in the news brief today, with this banking system thing, where there is just it's like being in the middle of like a medieval battlefield, and you're in such thick fog, and there's guys riding past you on horses in every direction, and you have no idea who's who and what's what and what, up and down, and you're totally disoriented. That's what I think is the battle space right now, the information battle space. And while that is extremely frustrating for, people like us who are trying to, orient ourselves and find our way, it's got to be just as frustrating for the power brokers, the people who are actually like the combatants in the arena, so to speak, who actually are, fighting against Donald Trump, I would say, and what I would describe as the sovereign alliance, Xi Jinping being one of them, Vladimir Putin being another. I think that's the point. I think the point is to just completely blanket the battle space in so much confusion that everyone's so disoriented. That's when you strike, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that there was a notable anomaly 2 days ago, or no, this was yesterday morning, actually, that Xi Jinping openly came out, and I've never heard this kind of speech or this kind of talk from Xi Jinping, where he basically said, he called for the Chinese yuan to be made the global reserve currency. That's a huge statement, but he didn't just say that by itself. Like that as a standalone, out of context statement has freaked out a lot of Westerners, because they're like, see, China is like, plotting to take down the USA and take over the world. We were right. No, I think that there's more to it than that. And if you listen to the whole speech, it very clearly lays out the importance of having a moral principle organizing the behavior of what currency does in an economy, the need to safeguard nations from the takeover by an oligarchical class. He directly speaks in those terms. And I think when you look at why the U.S. or how the U.S. became the global reserve currency and the role that's played, it didn't benefit the U.S. either. So the U.S. hasn't benefited by having its currency as the global reserve, because at the end of the day, the life of American people, the businesses in America, none of these things have thrived at all over the past 40, 50 years, while this thing, has been used as the basis of speculative warfare, of sanctions, of overthrowing governments abroad, but also destroying people within. So the idea that that's why America is great is because it is the global reserve currency is not true. That's a fallacy. That's why the oligarchy has been successful.
God, I completely agree.
Yeah.
I mean, the 1970s is when we officially achieved that status, right? It wasn't the 70s that we were kind of granted that, because prior to that it was the British pound.
Well, it was the Bretton Woods system, right? In 44, coming out of the Bretton Woods agreement, it was agreed that everybody's going to have a deposits of U.S. reserves, of U.S. treasuries that they'll buy into. It was immediately co-opted by the forces of Winston Churchill and John Maynard Keynes, who were devoted to getting rid of the nation state and infiltrating the U.S. and taking over its institutions. So they used that power instead of using it as the basis of, like, if you look at Harry Dexter White and Roosevelt and Henry Wallace and all of the guys who were like fighting against Churchill and this like Wall Street fascist apparatus, they were fighting to internationalize the successes of the New Deal that provided for the massive buildup of industry and agriculture and science and all this stuff in the 30s and 40s. They wanted to internationalize that and use the US dollar and the US manufacturing power as a basis to provide for machine tools and industrial power for nations who had suffered under colonialism to grow. That wasn't permitted. That plan was aborted. Stalin was iced out because Stalin also wanted to play a positive role in cooperating with these institutions, in working together to liberate the world, from essentially what Churchill represented. And he basically said, to Roosevelt's son, that Churchill's people killed your father. They poisoned him and they took over, and they did. And all of a sudden, the IMF, the World Bank, the GATT, all these things were used increasingly for neocolonialism. And then, like you said, then in 71 to 73, that's when like it went to a new accelerated phase where the petrodollar was created. And then all of a sudden, every transaction of energy, of oil and natural gas had to be made in US dollars. And that just like locked it in as a weapon of destruction instead of creation. So yeah, I saw that you pulled up that little announcement from RT. I don't know if it.
Yeah, and actually, I want to look at that real quick in a minute. But before, I just want to respond to that because everything you said, I agree with. On Friday night, we were on Only Lands, which is like their the Friday night hangout show, which is anybody who shows up. And Matt Trump, who is a relative of the president, was on there with us. And he, or at least I understand that Matt, please correct me if you're in the chat. But he was pointing out how, what we're going through right now with like in Minneapolis with like these riots and stuff is very similar to like what was happening in the 70s, and how after that all kind of subsided, that element in American culture like persisted for many, many years. And I kind of offered the counterpoint that not really a counterpoint, but just kind of the coloring that I'd spoken to so many people from that generation who were like in their 20s, like college age or their 20s in the 70s, who had just spoke to me over the past 15 years and told me about that time and how kind of scary it was. They're like the 70s were a legit scary time because, you didn't have the internet, you didn't have the like, information, like all your information you were getting was coming from like mainstream corporate sources, like centralized information. And it was all like fear mongering. And like it really did look like the world was like the economy was going to like just totally collapse and everything was going to bottom out. And people were very hopeless and the economy was very bleak. Everything was just very bleak. And so I just was offering the counterpoint that if we do enter a golden age, which I think we're posturing towards that, right? I mean, we have to get the ball across the goal line. But if we do enter a golden age and there is like real economic prosperity, not artificial prosperity, I think people will be highly disincentivized to engage in that kind of behavior, even if there are still like organizations and billionaires offering people money to show up for a protest, right? Because who's going to go show up and work for like $100 a day at a protest when you can go work kind of like a meager job, so to speak, and make multiple orders of magnitude higher than that, right? At least from like a real income standpoint. So that like I agree with him that I think that like the aftermath of a situation that we're in right now can be really, really scary. Like it can be hard to like get that element out of your culture. But I do think that one of the reasons that Trump has focused so much on economy in both his terms, that was like his high priority in 2017. Didn't really see the results of that until the end of 2018, going into 2019. But the same thing here is that I think the economy and having like real opportunity does bring people out of this mindset, like where they are susceptible to revolutionary rhetoric and like the rhetoric of like revolutionaries, like what's his name, the Rules for Radical, Saul Alinsky, right? Like that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I mean that's the formula for any kind of color revolution is you have to destroy the economy and you have to make sure that there's that's a precondition. If the economy can be degraded such that nihilism it can increase because young men, especially young men, but women too, have no feeling for a future. There's no sense of optimism and no opportunities, like reasonably no chance for you to advance and express your what you have inside of you to contribute to society. No opportunity is provided for you to do that because your society is not going anywhere. It's being degraded. At that point, people get desperate. They get resentful. They get angry. They also, out of desperation, they're more inclined to take money for the only jobs, the Antifa jobs, right? Like all of a sudden, or in the 70s case, as was discovered, you had the Ford Foundation providing for all sorts of, putting tons of money into funding local anti-imperial Maoist Leninist groups of nominally Trotskyist, Marxist variety all across the 60s and 70s throughout schools in Columbia and other things. It was the Ford Foundation behind a lot of that stuff, providing massive capital. So yeah, kids could all of a sudden get jobs by being a revolutionary rabble rouser, and they would absorb a lot of angry young people who were rightfully angry that their society was, they saw JFK die. They saw wars in East Asia expanding.
Yeah.
They didn't know why. They saw the
tangible.
industrial.
It's tangible in their daily life. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. So
Yep.
like you said, if you give these people or an opportunity, they won't want to do those things to burn down their nation because they actually have faith that their nation is viable and they could participate in making it better. And the same thing for just kids in the Middle East, in Afghanistan, in Libya, same deal, or in Syria. They won't want to join these CIA funded, terrorist recruitment centers and madrasas if they actually have an economy that gives them a place rather than taking the $50 a week in order to be a jihadi, and your family's going to be taken care of if you die, and so you don't have to worry about or stress about your mother and your kids starving because there's no economy. All of a sudden, there's going to be some mullah or whatever that'll provide for money for your family if you do blow up or something. So that's not the way to run an economy. No,
exactly.
Bad way to run an economy.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And it's also worth noting that, the petrodollar, like getting off the gold standard, the petrodollar, that is what laid the foundation for quantitative easing, right? That's what laid the foundation for the Federal Reserve just printing money. And then they were, I'm not a financial expert. I mean, I know people who are far more versed in finance than I am. So I'm just kind of an amateur here talking about this, but my understanding is that because there was this requirement for all these countries to hold US dollars, right? And there was a demand to purchase our treasury bonds and purchase our debt. They were kind of able to spread out this money they were printing so that we didn't experience hyperinflation all at once. The inflation was a slow boil, where it's you look at the inflation line over the decades and it's slow, right? I mean, you don't wake up one day and all of a sudden you can't afford anything because it's happened slowly. You've gotten used to it, gradual. Now that's been accelerated over the past few years, but I think that was all kind of by design.
Yeah. And well, it's funny how that works because you have both the gradualism punctuated with these moments of pain, these little mini shocks. Every once in a while, like in 73, the way that they got this petrodollar is they first induced artificially. And it was the Saudi foreign minister, the former Saudi foreign minister, I forget his name, gave an interview in 2011 documenting how it was Henry Kissinger who oversaw the oil crisis, the oil shocks in the early 70s, which saw a 400% inflation on the price of oil. So, but it's not like there was an absence of oil on the market or something. There was still a bounty of oil. It's just that Kissinger organized to ensure that the tankers full of oil were not allowed to come to port in the United States and kept them away from the U.S. artificially to psychologically break a lot of people in America and the USA around the idea of that we are a nation of abundance, that we could expect abundance, that no, the new wisdom, as we're exiting the Vietnam War, is that the new wisdom is scarcity, and you have to think about and they created this massive explosion, and it worked. It did give people were waiting for miles with their cars, to get into a gas station, and by the time they got to the gas station, half the time it was empty and no gas. So it did screw up a lot of people. But then, like you said, after you get this shock therapy, then you can ease up the tension a little bit, and then go back to gradualism until you get the next punctuation in 1987 or something where the markets tank 25% or more even, and people are freaked out again, jumping out of windows, bankers are jumping out of windows, and farmers are committing suicide because there's a massive destruction of the economy, by design, with mergers and acquisitions that made it impossible for small and medium enterprises and farming and business to get credit, to get capital, to compete with the types of prices that a Walmart could provide. All of a sudden, small businesses were getting crushed. Suicides were spiking in the 80s, but it appeared like the economy was doing great. The money, if you were just a mathematician looking at the stats, you're like, whoa, the markets are rallying until they don't. And then with that shock therapy in 87 in October, Greenspan, former, JP Morgan banker who called for breaking down all regulation, breaking down, Glass-Steagall back in the earlier 80s. He's now Federal Reserve Chairman, and he says, okay, the solution is let's just normalize derivatives. Let's just take junk bonds that people were going to jail for, and we're going to like massively expand junk bonds as a new way of doing economy. And all of a sudden people can speculate with nothing. Ephemeral, weather derivatives. People could gamble on the price of what they thought the weather was going to be in 5 weeks in Panama, because Coke stocks would generally, go up if the demand increased, because there's going to be abnormally, 10-degree on average warmer weather than usual. So you could then just gamble on these things. And like Xi Jinping, actually, I was reading in his speech, one thing that I really liked, the speech that where he called for this, the yuan is the new reserve currency. He said, what will make or break the system is its moral culture. When finance detaches from the real economy, it loses its reason for existing. And then he goes on to say, if finance becomes obsessed with self-circulation and self-expansion, it becomes water without a source, a tree without roots. We must avoid the Western predicament of financial oligarchs hijacking public policy and deepening social division. So that's like just a couple of statements that he made in the context, because that's true. I think that's the core of it. It's as soon the sleight of hand was the severing of the monetary aspect, the financial aspect of the economy, the debt and everything associated, the prices, the theory of interest rates associated with the flow and circulation of capital from the real economy. Because one should, the cycles of the credit system, the cycles of finance should always support the cycles of the productive, part of the world that we actually live in. And when you break them apart and you get everybody just to think gambling and making tricks to make more money happen quicker with no consideration of whether you're destroying the real economy, at that point, you're dead. Like you just don't know it yet.
Yeah, well, think about like what pulled us out of, like, ostensibly, like what pulled us out of the stagflation is what I think is what they called it, of the 70s, right? What pulled us out of that? It was the Gordon Gekko Wall Street 1980s, right? Which was all about finance. It was all about speculation. It was all about like basically artificial faux economy, because people were getting rich, people were making lots of money. There was lots of money flying around. But like you said, it was divorced from the reality of like a real economy, so to speak. Now, I think we had probably a stronger manufacturing base back then than we even do now, because they were still in the process of offshoring all that stuff. But again, it's like, think about like what the big cultural markers were of the 70s. It was Gordon Gekko. It was Wall Street. It was fast, easy money. It was, that sort of prosperity. It was that sort of like pomp, right? And that really like embodied, the Nuevo Riche branding of the 1980s. Like, anybody can get rich. You just got to get into finance. You got to get into Wall Street. You got to start investing, like those kind of ideas, right? And then that fuels, like you said, the transition towards just like a financial based speculative economy.
Well, and I know we're going to talk about some actual events around the world, but it's useful to go through this kind of conversation a little bit, because I don't think it happens enough. But I was just thinking as you were speaking that with the me generation, because that's what they called in hindsight, or maybe they called it in the 80s. I don't know. We were just babies back then, but maybe they called it that. The me generation is what the 1980s sort of burst of Reaganomic, Thatcherist prosperity, or apparent seeming prosperity, was called. But it's very indicative of how we tend, if we're not careful, we as humans tend to vacillate from extremes, unnatural or unhealthy extremes. And so a lot of the me generation, the people who are, in their 30s, the careerists, late 20s, 30s, go-getters, 40s, in the early 80s, were themselves earlier in the 60s, the young vanguard, baby boomer, new age generation that was super utopian. A lot of them had gotten sucked into the psyops of MK Ultra, of, as I mentioned, the Ford Foundation operations as well, criticizing, and rightfully so, criticizing things that should be criticized. America's turn into becoming an empire. The immorality of what capitalism was increasingly becoming during that time. These are things that were rightfully criticized, but they had no idea why it was happening. They just, it was
the imperialism, like they didn't really quite understand it.
No, they didn't. And they're being flooded with, these philosophies from Esalen, from these other, new agey theosophical channels that were like organizing and infiltrating different schools to promote this idea that we could just like have sex and drugs to make love, not war, right? Like we could just, if we have enough free love,
sex and orgies and free love, and like by doing that, it's like those are expressions of like earnest love between human beings, right?
Yeah, and our good vibes would just increase to the point that evil would just break down, corruption would disappear, and we go back to the garden. The Eden would reemerge again, and the flower people would win, and that didn't work. They got the oil shocks, they got the assassinations of their leaders, they got more corruption, the anti-nuclear movement that came out of the Summer of Love and all that stuff, and Earth Day in '68 and all of these things. So they were like rallying to shut down, nuclear weapons, but in fact, they just shut down nuclear power, and the nuclear weapons continue to grow, right? Yep. And that didn't work. And a lot of these spiritually abused young people increasingly just became jaded, and they went from being utopian, free love, let's all have some socialistic world commune loving each other, to becoming hyper radical individualistic, ultimately cynical people, but optimistic, kind of a superficial optimism, because it's all about like, look out for number one and make the world get better. And then that resulted in a different kind of psychodynamic problem, right? So you have one and these extremes of an unnatural embrace of the collective and unnatural embrace of radical individualism. Neither one works. You gotta find a way to take the best of both worlds, right? We have to take the sacredness of the individual, but at the same time, not cut out the fact that we're not an island. We're part of a society, a social, process that we also have to harmonize ourselves with. What do you got there with Trump?
Matthew Trump. Hey, Matt, he's in the chat. He says,
hey, Matthew.
Says Gen X is cynical partly because we lived through the massive rug pull of the boomers pivoting hard to the lust of finance after the 1980s. And I think there's probably a lot of truth to that. And again, it's like, I'm glad you brought up Reaganomics. I think this is timely. There's a clip I want to play here from Trump from yesterday. Like Reaganomics, like Reagan is considered kind of like the standard bearer of like conservatism, right? And it's like, oh, he's the one who brought America back to life. He's the one who saved America from the stagflation of the 70s, right? Even though like his entire administration was just full of CIA Mossad shills. I mean, my mind is still blown that Mark Levin was his deputy attorney general. When I learned that, I was like, my mind is just totally blown. And also, what's his name? Dinesh D'Souza. Dinesh D'Souza was one of his advisors, like right out of college.
No
Dinesh
way.
D'Souza,
really?
Oh yeah. Oh, Dinesh D'Souza, there's a picture of him and Reagan shaking hands in the White House. He was fresh out of like, I guess, college. And by the way, he is a total he's a shill too. He comes from like the Yale elite. His father was like a pharmaceutical, big pharma executive. He came from like all private school upbringing, like elitist background, went to Yale, was part of the whole Yale, like, all about Yale. And then was plucked out of Yale and put into Reagan's White House. So he is part of that. He's part of the club. And he presents himself as an outsider, and they put him in prison or whatever under Obama. And so he has a sob story there. But if you go look at the stuff he pushes war, he pushes Zionism, he pushes all the stuff that doesn't make any sense and is definitely not America first. So I want to play this clip that from Trump had all of the congressmen in the White House when he signed the bill to save the government, turn the government back on, because of course we can't have a government shutdown. What would we do without a federal government? Listen to what Lindsey Graham says here. This is hilarious. And then listen to Trump's reaction.
But, I will say this. I think I can say, what do you think, Lindsey? My second term is blowing my first term away. And my first term was really good.
Reagan plus,
yeah. Well, whatever. Thank you very much, everybody. But,
totally dismissive. He's like Reagan plus, and he's like, man, I really like. You can just tell he's like, man, I really wish he hadn't said that. Whatever. Okay, so here's why I posted this, and Trump just like people started laughing. They're like, wow, that was kind of a dismissive response. Here's why. I said Lindsey Graham is a moron who has clearly never read The Art of the Deal. If he had, he would understand why Trump was so dismissive of his remark. And so I go to ChatGPT because I know the answer here, but I wanted to get a screenshot. In his 1987 book, The Art of a Deal, what did Donald Trump say about Ronald Reagan's presidency? In his 1987 book, The Art of a Deal, which is part memoir, part business advice manual, Donald Trump did not actually praise Ronald Reagan's presidency in glowing terms. He was at times critical of Reagan, describing him in less than flattering ways. According to historians who have reviewed the book and Trump's early political commentary, Trump referred to Reagan as kind of a con man who couldn't deliver the goods for the American people, suggesting that Reagan's communication skills were stronger than his substantive achievements. This comment reflects Trump's broader skepticism at the time about traditional politicians' ability to produce results, even if they were charismatic, a theme that runs through parts of The Art of the Deal.
Interesting. I thought that Trump was more favorable to Reagan. I didn't realize that he called him a con man. And
yeah. And again, that book came out in 1987. And then you think about, like, you go and you watch, because I remember when I read The Art of a Deal years ago, that blew my mind too. I was like, whoa, like Trump doesn't like Reagan. And again, like, I think this is just like this is signal that Trump is way more savvy and way more like red pilled and way more in tune than most people like in the truth community probably give him credit for. I mean, go back and watch the interviews of him on Oprah Winfrey from 1987, 1988, 1989, when he started to become political. He like went to, George Bush Sr. invited him to the Republican National Convention, and he gave an interview to what's his name? Not George Wallace, but Wallace's son, Mike Wallace, right? It was when Mike Wallace was young. Trump says, like in all those interviews, he's like, look, our government has no idea what it's doing. It is literally engaging in the worst trade deals imaginable. It's outsourcing all of our manufacturing base to Japan and Taiwan. It's basically allowing Japan and Taiwan to come dump all these cheap goods into our marketplace with no trade barrier, no tariff. Meanwhile, like Japan sends us VCRs, they send us cars. You go try to sell a VCR in Japan. Go try to sell a car in Japan. Like, good luck. Like, they're never going to let you do it. He's calling out Reagan in that moment. Like, that's who he's calling out. And that's, the late 80s. So it's like the signal was always there, but Lindsey Graham is too stupid to realize that he's like not praising Trump. He's not giving Trump a compliment in Trump's eyes when he says that. That's why Trump was like, yeah, whatever. Okay. So anyway, I thought that was like an interesting little tidbit. But yeah, let's pivot. I want to pull up the China article again because there's something but before you do it, let's do an ad read. Okay. Yeah. If you want to do an ad read, and then I'll prepare the next segment.
Okay. All right, here we go. Here's first ad of the day coming up. All right. This is just a straight ad read, and I lost the script. Where is it? Okay. I got it. Okay. Maha yourself with supplements that don't suck from Conscious Strength. Founded by Badlands' very own Jordan Sather in 2019, Conscious Strength products are made in America and won't break your bank, unlike other online brands. Their lineup includes collagen for strengthening joints and hair, electrolytes to get rid of those cramps, green powders that taste good and mix easy, Shilajit gummies, methylene blue, zeolite, and more. Flip the finger to pharma, be your own doctor, and get supplements that you can trust from Conscious Strength. Go to badlandsmedia.tv/strength to shop now. And one more time, badlandsmedia.tv/strength. And the link will be in the description box below. And let's follow that up with, all right, so that's Jordan's products. And by the way, his green powders are fantastic. I had a couple of them that I picked up at the last GART conference I was at, and they're fantastic. Let's do a little hide this thing. How do I hide it? There we go. And might as well just let's do one more. Okay. All good. We'll do a Valentine's Day ad. All right. Okay. Give your Valentine the all good treatment. This Valentine's Day, show your love with premium clean skincare and hair care. Crafted from 100% grass-fed tallow and organic cold-pressed oils. Zero parabens, sulfates, toxins, BPAs, and PFAs. Just real nourishing ingredients with zero junk. Handcrafted in small batches by Jessica in sunny Florida and packaged in amber glass jars for maximum freshness. It's all good inside and out. Try the lightweight pure whipped tallow for deep all-day hydration. Smooth and firm with the No-Tox smoothing serum. Revive your locks with the game-changing tallow hair mask for ultimate nourishment. Tame and style with the tamed hair serum or tallow beard balm for effortless control and shine. Longing for the sun? For a limited time, score a free sample of All Goods tallow sunscreen with any bundle purchase just by using code Badlands at badlandsmedia.tv/allgood. Snag your discounted bundle curated for women and men, plus a free sample today, and feel good knowing your purchase supports the amazing creators of Badlands Media. Head to badlandsmedia.tv/allgood, code Badlands. All right. So you were going to bring up something to do with Xi Jinping's speech.
Yeah, and I want to address a comment first, just to keep in people's mind, because I know that a lot of people have kind of adopted this idea, or they've let it crawl into their thinking, and I totally understand why. I'm not blaming anybody for thinking this way. Ario Poppy, Trump doesn't govern like the guy in the early interviews. He has become a lobbyist shill. So I would posit, and I'm not making excuses, and this is not hopium. Matt, I've been laying out an argument for, I think, years now, that especially over the past, I think, few months, that this is all strategy. There's strategy here that seems to be very, very intentional. If you look at what the deep state has been doing, I mean, and I'm just calling them that for lack of a better term. You can call them the unipolar hegemony, you can call them the Zionists, you can call them like whatever it is, the London bankers, like whatever it is you want to call them. They crashed.
Vampires.
Yeah, the vampires. They crashed the Iranian rial on January 8th. The Iranian rial, I believe, went from trading at 1 rial to it was 42,000 rial to $1 US, to I think 1.5 million or something like that rial to US. So basically now, as far as the marketplace is concerned, an Iranian rial is worth $0 and 0 pounds and zero euro. It's worthless. It's not considered a worthwhile currency anymore. And last Wednesday after our show, I discovered this. I don't remember if we talked about it on the show or not. I don't think we did. We might have, but I laid out. I discovered on last Tuesday night that credit to Tyler Durden, that he kind of put in my mind's eye that there was a continuity of government plan in Iran, and that they had devolved the powers of the government, and that the governors in Iran were given the ability in August to engage in trade agreements that would allow them to bypass all the bureaucracy and red tape of their government, engage in trade using foreign currency, knowing that it seems like foresight that the Iranian rial was going to be crashed. It also gave them permission to engage in the barter system. And you'll recall that that's how Hitler pulled the German economy out of hyperinflation in the 30s, was using like that strange like barter system Havara agreement that they did with the Palestine Bank and the Zionists. Yeah, so there's definitely historic precedent for that, and there was absolutely foresight that something was going to happen like to that degree. And then you look at how silver and Bitcoin and everything has crashed in the past few days, like just totally cratered after this massive rally for silver and gold. I think that was the deep state striking back for sure. That reality is very real. Like, I think people need to, in this audience, I think is far better at it than other segments of the Badlands audience, who tend to be a little more hopium driven than this audience. I think this audience is a little more pragmatic and maybe skeptical of what the Trump presidency represents. But I think we have to be very, very like sober minded when we look at this, that the enemy here that we're up against has the ability to destroy the economy if they think that like they've lost the ship, they're going to scuttle the ship rather than turn it over, right? I think that's very real reality. And you look at the fact that President Trump hired Scott Bessent to be his Treasury Secretary, and Scott Bessent is known in the financial world, as Burning Bright has researched and informed me of. He's known as the Hatchet Man because he was Soros's guy who went and famously crashed the British pound, and that's what got Soros like super rich. Scott Bessent was the architect of that entire scheme when they crashed the British pound, and I guess Soros like shorted it or whatever and got super rich off of that. And basically that became the model for Soros, is go around and crashing currencies, doing currency manipulation, and crashing economies, and then getting rich doing that. And Scott Bessent, I think, was like the architect that kind of did it for him the first time against the British pound. And so the fact that Trump has that guy working for him in the Treasury is not lost on me. That nobody understands currency manipulation, I think, like Scott Bessent does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely a high level behind the scenes organization for sure. Like I said, for me, I'm hoping that it's true white hats working patriotically and not a game within a game for ultimately a long game of something like a dark enlightenment. But like part of what I, so my mind, just so people know how my mind is always, I got the bicameral thing going, right? I've got multiple hypotheses. But like when I look at, for me, I've always looked at Scott Bessent as part of the British complex. So the story given was that the British suffered because of Soros's speculation against the British pound, and then but Britain, or the British Empire, as we've come to know that it still exists, benefited massively thereby, because before that, the whole plan to get the euro was a largely British directed strategy to destroy all of the sovereign nation states of Europe. And it was coming out of all the top bankers at the Bank of England, the City of London, that were doing a lot of the sculpting of how this was going to work out. And the idea was that Britain was going to be a part of the Eurozone. But
the Eurozone,
that was finally being unleashed onto the world, the Maastricht Treaty, was put forth the same time that NAFTA was being put forth in 92. That was like the idea was to create the foundations for the European Parliament, the Euro first. Britain was able to say, well, we've got this whole banking crisis that we're dealing with. So you guys just go ahead and we'll join you later on. We promise. We know we've been with you this whole time, but we'll just stay out of it for a while we clean up our stuff because, Soros. But that gave them a really great excuse to stay out of the trap that they set for everybody else. And then when everybody else was in the trap, they could close the door and then kind of laugh, keeping their pound. And that's a big chunk of, that
makes sense. But yes, my point is not that what was the intent of doing it. My point is just that Bessent was the architect of it. Like he was the guy who pieced the whole thing together. And so he understands currency manipulation and how that is done. And and of course, that's something that Trump has talked about with China. He's accused China of doing it for 10 years. He's been China's been manipulating their currency and getting rich doing it, and they're screwing everybody else over. And now Trump's kind of doing that. I mean, there are analysts all over the place, especially in Russia, talking about how it appears that Trump's plan is to crash the dollar. Like that appears to be Trump's plan, is to water down the dollar, and to basically do currency manipulation, do everything he's accused China of doing for years, right, for the benefit of the U.S. We'll see what happens there, but I think we all agree, most of us agree, that the fiat petrodollar is a scam and needs to go. It was designed to be a time bomb. So who can control the blast? Who can control that demolition? Because it's going to be demolished. That's why it exists, is a self-detonating mechanism. And the question is just, is that explosion going to be directed towards this shadow banking complex of oligarchical, deep state capital or finance capital, or is it going to be directed towards the people? And obviously the oligarchs who set the bomb want it to be directed towards the people. So we commit suicide in order to prop up these too big to fails and have them controlling the terms of the new system. Hopefully in that sense. And speaking to your point, like coming out of this whole crisis with Iran, that I don't know, it certainly was bad optics, on the one hand of what happened as far as the thousands of people dying, the destabilizations in January. But we do know that despite this accelerated danger of a new military strike on Iran, which even I was very concerned about up until a few days ago, now all of a sudden, the U.S. battle fleet, the SS Lincoln was all positioned. It was looking like everything was in place for that inevitable strike. Nope. Actually, the Iranian regime, Larijani, probably had a big role to play in that. Who's the head of the Supreme Council? Not Supreme Council. Yeah, Ali Larijani. He's the head of the National Security Council. By the way, Larijani and the National Security Council, they're at the center of the continuity of government plan. So they're the ones who actually created the Defense Council in early August. The Defense Council is the thing that decentralized the power and gave the power to all the governors. Larijani's been the one publicly communicating all this to the Iranian public. He's been the one doing all the interviews in Iranian media. He's now the one interfacing with President Trump and Scott Bessent. He's the one now interfacing with and Putin as well. He's just in Russia, Putin. Right? Yep, correct. And And by the way, the purpose of the Defense Council, this thing that apparently they wrote it into their constitution in the 80s because of the Iran-Iraq war, right? That created a situation where they're like, we need continuity of government in case like all of our leaders get killed in this war. Yeah. So they created this, they wrote in Article 176 of the Iranian constitution, which allows the government to decentralize control so that these governors can take over and basically be the chief executive of their province. That's my understanding. And, you know, but the purpose of this Defense Council, it says, is to reorganize the hierarchy and the structure of the intelligence apparatus and the security apparatus, separate the two. So you have military security and then you have intelligence, which right now they're like deeply, I guess up until they did this, they were deeply intermeshed. My speculation, and I think that this is, a lot of people have been speculating this from different angles, is that their security apparatus, intelligence apparatus, was infiltrated by Mossad. And basically all of these like protests and everything were being organized by bad actors who were put in place over the course of decades. It was a whole network that basically was given the green light by Israel and said, go, 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 go. We're going to overthrow the government now, like thinking that there was going to be this help that was going to materialize in the form of a military strike from Trump. But Trump couldn't do that because the Abraham Lincoln strike group had been moved to Venezuela, to Caribbean, to deal with Maduro. And Trump said, whoops, sorry. Yeah. And then all of a sudden they lose the internet, right? The same day. So they crashed the real on January 8th. They take down the internet. And then Trump all of a sudden comes out and says, Iranian patriots, retake control of your institutions. Go, 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 go. Help is on the way. Even though all of the deep state,
he's clearly baiting. Yeah, he's baiting them out. Yeah.
Yeah. And then that's the same day he says that, though. The same day he says, go, 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 go. Elon Musk opens up Starlink, gives everyone access to Starlink. And then the Russians, we now know, Arakchi came out and said, the Russians helped us hack Starlink, and then we used the Starlink network to track down every single person who was involved in this, and we've arrested them. I think all the people, like the deaths that they're reporting, at least for the most part, and the arrests are all these operatives. And now like if this theory is accurate in any capacity, and I could be wrong about elements of it, basically what they've done is they've just eliminated this entire infiltration network that was designed to take down the Iranian government, start a war between Iran and Israel, which would have led to a war between Russia and the United States. And It's all been diffused now, and it's not going to happen. And I think that's part of the reason that Lindsey Graham and all them are flipping out, and like Mark Levin is.
Mark Levin's totally, he's shitting his pants.
He's so mad.
Absolutely.
At Trump. So like that brings us to the whole discussion about economy, though. So let's look at this article, because I just noticed this now. I read this article the other day, but now having done the research that I'm going to go into in depth on my show at 2:00, so we'll just kind of cover it at a higher level here. I noticed this comment right here. It says, the German Federal Financial Supervisor Authority, BaFin, warned last week that the U.S. dollar's status as the world's reserve currency could be challenged as early as 2026 amid funding shortages, geopolitical shocks, and growing politicalization. Now, the interesting part about that, like BaFin didn't mean a thing to me yesterday, right? 2 days ago, but it means something to me now. And the reason is because of what I researched with Gustavo Petro. So Petro went and met with Trump at the White House yesterday. This is the president of Colombia, right? And unfortunately, it wasn't televised. I tend to think that part of the reason it wasn't televised is because Gustavo Petro has been very, very vocally anti-Israel, and I think the optics of that would have been, for whatever reason, they didn't film it, which is unfortunate because I was really looking forward to that. However, we did get this from him. So, like, remember, this is the guy that Trump, after he arrested Maduro, said, "This guy better watch his ass. He might be next." Right?
Yeah.
And then so Trump gives him a copy of his 1987 book with the inscription, "You are great." Gustavo Petro comes out and trolls everyone at X about it. Says, "What did Trump mean when he said this to me in the dedication? I don't speak English very well." Yeah, so I went back and I read, and then the commentary from both Trump and Petro after it is that, hey, we agreed that we're going to work together, we're going to collaborate on anti-cartel operations, and we're going to talk about getting the sanctions lifted. Because remember, Trump put sanctions on Petro back in, I think, in December. He put sometime back in the past few months, he put sanctions on Petro and his whole family, his kids and his wife. Okay, so I decided last night to go read the actual Treasury sanction. I read the whole thing, and this paragraph stuck out to me. It says, Gustavo Petro's erratic behavior has also driven Colombia further apart from its partners in additional ways. In 2024, he shared confidential information obtained via secure anti-money laundering communication channels, threatening the integrity of the international financial system and leading to the suspension of Colombia's financial intelligence unit from the Egmont Group. He has also allied himself with narco-terrorist regime of Nicolas Maduro, Moros, and the Cartel de los Soles, which we know is bullshit. Like that's not even real. But this Egmont Group, I was like, what is this Egmont? I've never heard of this before. So I went and looked into it. I asked ChatGPT, what is the Egmont Group? And it says the Egmont Group of financial intelligence units is an international network of financial intelligence units, FIUs, that cooperate to combat money laundering, terrorist financing, and other serious financial crimes. What is it? Founded in 1995. It currently includes 170 plus member FIUs from around the world. It's named after the Egmont Palace in Brussels, where the group first met. The Egmont Group provides a secure and trusted framework for the cooperation among national FIUs by facilitating information exchange. Members share financial intelligence related to suspicious transactions and criminal activity, providing more secure technology, supporting capacity building, and setting operational standards. And so basically what this thing is it's a international intelligence sharing network where all the intelligence units from every single financial intelligence units from every single government in the world collaborates, and they say, hey, this guy Matt Ehret is doing some sketchy stuff with his bank account. Let's send this information to the Canadian authorities so they can go arrest him and prosecute him for financial crimes, right? So it operates completely above all of the national governments. It doesn't have any direct control over, systems like within at least the U.S. government. I haven't looked into other governments. But the idea is that it can just send this stuff to the DOJ. It can just send this stuff to the FBI. It's watching you constantly. This is like Big Brother. Like if you were to describe Brother from 1984, this is Big Brother. I didn't even know this thing existed. Okay.
I didn't know it existed either until you literally just brought this up to me just this morning. I had no idea. Being in Canada and supposedly somebody who's got their finger on the pulse of what's going on behind the scenes in Canada, I did actually not know about something as powerful as the Egmont Group of financial intelligence units.
Yeah, financial intelligence, and so that's what that BaFin thing was, like the German financial intelligence unit that warned that the global reserve status of the U.S. dollar was in threat. That was the German version of this group, right? And so here's like their website. I was tooling around on their website last night, trying to understand it better. I stumbled onto their, organization and structure. So I went to the organization and structure because I was like, all right, so how does this thing work? Like they have this chart that kind of explains everything. Like here's the committee, you got regional groups, you got working groups. And then all of a sudden I get down to the Egmont Group Secretariat. It says the Egmont Group Secretariat provides strategic, tactical, or technical and administrative support to yada, yada, yada. It says the EGS is headed by the executive secretary and reports directly to the chair of the Egmont Group. The Egmont Group Secretariat was established in July 2007 and is based in Canada. Mr. Jerome Beaumont is the current executive secretary of the Egmont Group. And so I went and asked ChatGPT, am I understanding this right? Like, is this thing saying that it's headquartered in Canada? And it says, where is the HQ located? It says the headquarters of the Egmont Group of Financial Intelligence Units is located in Toronto, Canada. The secretariat is hosted by FinTrack, which is Canada's. By Fin, I think is what it was called, was the German one. The Canadian one is called FinTrack, Canada's Financial Intelligence Unit, and serves as the administrative and coordination hub for Egmont Group's global activities. If you'd like, I can explain why Toronto was chosen. I haven't asked it to pursue that, but I should. But the point is that this group is what is tracking all of our bank accounts, and this is actually what is going to send your financial information to your government to get you arrested for whatever reason they determine, right?
Powerful. Wow.
And it's very powerful, and it's based in Canada. When I saw it was based in Canada, I fell out of my chair. I was like, holy crap, the whole Mark Carney is the king of central bankers thing just came to mind, right?
Yeah.
And so like I'm only beginning to understand what this thing is. Like
it's fascinating, right? Just to be quick, because this is the thing, right? There's a book that people, if you could afford to buy a copy, I've read this book a couple of times. It is an immensely powerful, useful resource for all things global financial drug money laundering, and it was published by Executive Intelligence Review in 1978, and it was republished and updated in 88 and 92. There's a newer update in 2008. But it's called Dope Incorporated. And it basically outlines in the most masterful way I've ever seen the continuity of the international drug economy from the opium wars to the present, and it proves demonstrably that the drug banks, HSBC, all of these multinational things that were part of the British Empire that oversaw the opium wars to destroy China and create the foundation of a massive organized crime syndicate with various expressions with a Chinese Green Gang version, Italian, Sicilian, Corsican, Jewish mafia groups, doing their thing, the narco, Latin American variations of the thing, the Afghan versions of it later on. They appear different, but it's all part of one singular entity that maintained a direct continuity from 1865 all the way up until the present. And they make the point in this book that it's Canada. This is what got me really riled up when I was first sort of piecing together as a Canadian, what the hell is going on in the world and what is this thing I was born into? This book helped me appreciate what appears on the surface to be a nice, polite, country that's everybody loves Canadians, blah, blah, blah. No, there's this deep-seated thing. And every time you have a drug bank getting busted, whether it's the Banque Coutts that was busted for laundering drug money, that was the Queen's personal bank in 2012. They paid a little fine, and who absorbed them? The Royal Bank of Canada, HSBC's operations in Canada, which were abundant. I mean, and HSBC was also busted for hundreds of millions of dollars of drug money. But I mean, that's what they were caught openly for, but it was billions beyond that. But as soon as they were caught under the Senator Carl Levin hearings and they couldn't get out of it, they basically had to renegotiate some things. And by 2024, all of their Canadian holdings were absorbed by the Royal Bank of Canada. Toronto Dominion Bank, one of the biggest banks with huge outlets all over the United States, got busted for a $3 billion fine for laundering massive amounts of drug money just last year. These are all Canadian banks that are playing such a key role. Also with the Cayman Islands, the Scotiabank operation, that's another Bank of Nova Scotia. Their operations all over the Cayman Islands is huge. They're such a nerve center. So the fact that this thing, whose job is ostensibly to oversee criminal abuses, terrorist financing, and drug money laundering, is based in Belgium and Canada, or founded in Belgium and set up in Canada. My God, it's and to read that, sitting by myself reading that last night after learning all about Mark Carney from you and the importance of Mark Carney and what he is, right? And then watching what happened in Davos a week or two ago, right, between him and Trump. And then read that. I mean, I literally fell out of my chair. I was like, this is, you could not have written this script better. This is to your point, Canada could be the head of the snake, or one of the many heads of the snake, right? I mean, it's really, really strange. So remember, I'll bring us back to this Treasury document, and it says in 2024, so 2 years ago, Gustavo Petro shared confidential information obtained via secure anti-money laundering communication channels, meaning information that he had gotten through this intelligence apparatus, threatening the integrity of the entire apparatus and leading to the suspension of Colombia's financial intelligence units from the EGMOC group. So he was kicked out. Colombia was kicked out because he had shared confidential information that he obtained through this group, right? And he pissed off all the bankers, and they said, you know what? Y'all are out. Okay. So again, going back to Trump and his behavior over the past year, lots of
ostensible victories, right, when it comes to economy and tariffs and trade deals and all of those things. But a lot of his rhetoric and the stuff that he said has made a lot of people uncomfortable because it to the commenter's point earlier, it appears that he's like placating lobbyists. He's placating the deep state. He's palling around with Netanyahu and the Zionists. What the hell's going on, right? Well, it appears that right now, over this past month, that we're now turning the corner, because I would argue, like I've presented the whole Maduro lawsuit thing. We're going to get back into that in a second. This meeting with Gustavo Petro, which again was not televised, like it was not highly publicized at all. Like unless you were looking for it, you probably wouldn't even know that it happened. It was barely publicized by the White House. And yet this happens. So here's Gustavo Petro holding a press conference after his meeting with Trump. It's all in Spanish, so I just grabbed the screenshot, but I do want to play another clip from it. And it says, this is put out, the Presidencia Colombia is like the official office of the Colombian presidency. So he retweets this. It says, after his meeting with President Donald Trump, the head of state, Gustavo Petro stated that the fight against drug trafficking must now focus on the major financiers and international structures whose capital operates outside of Colombia. The president noted that he provided President Trump with information and names of these structures and reiterated the need to pursue them jointly through cooperation and international intelligence sharing. Okay. Now watch this video from the same exact press conference. Listen to what he says. I'm going to read it because he's speaking Spanish. So I'm going to silence him and I'm going to read what he says. He says, the third one, the front line of the drug trafficking is not what you imagine. The front line of drug trafficking lives in Dubai, in Madrid, in Miami. He is known to U.S. agencies. I passed their names to President Trump. Their ties beyond themselves. They are the bosses of bosses. Their capital is outside of Colombia, and it is necessary to pursue them jointly through an articulation of intelligence from many sectors of the world, and this has been proposed and is being done. That's why it's the front. That's why it's the. I think he goes on to say like that's why that's the focus of their intent. So the meeting that Gustavo Petro and Trump had yesterday was about going after the international financiers of drug trafficking and the cartels, which he said is not in South America. It's in Madrid. It's in Dubai. It's in Miami. Mm-hmm. It's in all the other financial centers of the world, and they're bankers, basically, the bosses of the bosses, right? So, again, I'm going to go deeper into this on my show, but I wanted to just kind of give a little teaser. The other take that I did, again, I didn't plan this. Like, I picked two different.
It kind of worked out that way, yeah.
And then I just started like going down the rabbit hole, and I was like, "Holy shit! This is like these two."
Well, and then your other parallel line of investigation on Credit Suisse folds into this very perfectly, right?
Yes. So this wasn't even on my radar. Burning Bright sent this to me and was like, "Hey, man, this is like you've been talking about Credit Suisse. Here's Credit Suisse." Yesterday, nearly 900 Nazi-linked accounts discovered at Credit Suisse. U.S. lawmakers say. Banks ties to SS more extensively than previously known, investigator says. Effort helped Nazis flee to Argentina, probe finds. Credit Suisse transferred funds from Jewish-held accounts to Nazi accounts, hearing told. A new probe of Swiss bank Credit Suisse discovered that 890 previously undisclosed accounts with potential Nazi links, a U.S. senator said on Tuesday, amid efforts to shine a light on what he said was the bank's hidden role in World War II crimes. Holders of the wartime accounts included the German Foreign Office, the SS paramilitary organization, and a German arms manufacturing company, U.S. Republican Senator Chuck Grassley told reporters in a briefing. So let's back up a little. The organizations were part of the Nazi apparatus under German leader Adolf Hitler that enabled the Holocaust, which killed about 6 million Jews, et cetera, right? And then it mentions this guy. The Senate Judiciary Committee, which Chuck Grassley chairs, heard on Tuesday more details on the investigation by U.S. lawyer Neil Barofsky, Swiss bank USB or UBS, which acquired Credit Suisse in an emergency takeover in 2023, hired to handle the probe. Barofsky led an earlier investigation when Credit Suisse was independent and said the bank sought to obstruct the effort and fired him. Okay. So I went and spent hours digging into this history to understand. I was like, wait, what the hell happened here? because I didn't know about any of this stuff. And so what I determined is that in 2020, here's the timeline, the very high level timeline. 2020, Sheldon Whitehouse, who is if anyone remembers that name, this guy's a Democrat senator. He's a prick. He's the guy who was like the vicious guy in the sweater vest who was going after Kash Patel and Tulsi Gabbard and all the people that Trump nominated, because Ash and I were covering all the nomination hearings last year. And this guy was literally like grinding his teeth. He was so mad at these people, like screaming at them and just saying the ugliest stuff and like demanding that Kash Patel like disclose like classified information. And like he was trying to get Kash Patel to trip up and like say something wrong. So what ends up happening is in March of 2020, this guy is approached by the Simon Wiesenthal Center, which is a Jewish human rights organization named for a famous Nazi hunter named Simon Wiesenthal. And they say, hey, we think that Credit Suisse has hundreds, if not thousands, of bank accounts that belong to SS like Nazi guys who escaped to Argentina. And we think they're still holding their money even today. Can you investigate? And so Sheldon Whitehouse forms this committee. He co-chairs it with Chuck Grassley. And then in 2021, Credit Suisse, maybe they got word of this or whatever, whiff of this, they hire a former U.S. prosecutor, Neil Barofsky, to act as an independent ombudsman to conduct internal investigations. This is something they're doing by themselves, not like with Congress. Just like they're like, hey, we want to know what's going on here. Can you figure out these accounts? And then 1 year into his investigation, they come back and because he starts presenting them with data, I assume, and they come back and they say, you know what? Stop. You're going too far. We want you to shrink your scope. You're going too far. He doesn't, apparently. And then they end up firing him at the end of 2022. December 2022, they fire him. They're like, you're going too far. We don't like what you're coming back with. You're done. 3 months later, they basically announced publicly that they're insolvent. And that then the Swiss government steps in and says, UBS, who is their main competitor in Switzerland, has to step in and basically acquire them, like buy them out, right? And this causes a major international outcry. The Saudis stand up and say, wait a minute, we just invested and bought 10% of Credit Suisse like a year or two ago, and we're now going to lose all of that investment because we're losing it now to UBS in this like basically like forced hostile takeover, basically. And the Saudis say, as a result, we are pulling all of our money out of the Swiss financial system, and we encourage everybody else to do the same. And people do. That causes a big bank run, apparently, in Switzerland, and it pisses off a lot of Swiss bankers. Backing up, like from previous investigations I've done over the past month, the reason that Credit Suisse went insolvent is because all of their assets were being seized by the DOJ in this thing called Operation Money Flight, which was largely driven. It was a bunch of different investigations that had been started, sounds like around 2014. So like even before Trump was in office, but it really took off after after Maduro files that lawsuit in 2018, because basically, which was a RICO lawsuit. It's a RICO civil action lawsuit. And as his lawyer publicly disclosed in 2023, this was the most damning trove of information and evidence I've ever seen for to prove beyond all doubt an international RICO investigation. Like this is the roadmap to how these banks were basically embezzling, laundering, and stealing money from PDVSA, from the Venezuelan oil company. And so because of that, all of these arrests start accelerating in 2018, after that evidence becomes clear. Starting with, by the way, 3 days after they filed the lawsuit in both Miami and Geneva, the Swiss authorities then raid the Helsinki office, which was the main defendant in the case, and take their computer servers, and then later, 4 months later, go arrest this guy, Matthias Krull in Miami, who was, that's the DOJ, who was laundering all the money. So the money was being stolen by these brokers, right, who are engaging directly with PDVSA. Then they're put in shell companies, right, after the money's embezzled and stolen from PDVSA through corruption, with the help of corrupt actors in PDVSA. Then once the company or the money hits these shell companies, the shell companies then give it to guys like Matthias Krull, who then launder it, right? They clean the money, And then once the money's cleaned, they then put it in Credit Suisse accounts. That's like the path.
Yeah, that's the formula.
Yeah. So then the DOJ is then going around, as well as European authorities are going around seizing all these Credit Suisse accounts. And because they forfeit all of this money, it ends up being $300 million worth of money directly connected to PDVSA, but it's over $100 billion connected to the cartels. It's $100 billion and 18,000 accounts that are correct. And I found that out because of this article right here. This article is from 2022. It's the Buenos Aires Times from Argentina. And it says right here, let me go to the beginning of the account. This one. Swiss banking group Credit Suisse managed accounts for clients involved in human rights abuses, corruption, and drug trafficking, according to reports based on leaked data on more than 18,000 accounts that together held more than $100 billion US. An anonymous whistleblower gave the information to German newspaper, however you pronounce that, which shared the data with the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, and a consortium of 47 media outlets, including all those outlets right there. It says right here, after months of reviewing the data, these outlets that were given this information noted journalists identified that, quote, dozens of accounts belong to corrupt politicians, convicted criminals, criminals under investigation by the justice system, spies, dictators, and other shady characters. The data covers accounts opened from the 1940s well into the last decade, the New York Times wrote. Among the individuals with accounts verified by the Swiss Secrets investigation are a number of Venezuelan clients who have been accused of looting state oil company PDVSA. Most of these accounts were opened between 2004 and 2015, they reported. Quote, hundreds of millions of dollars flowed into the bank accounts at a time when Venezuela's public coffers were being emptied. This journalist wrote for a local daily and La Nacion. The bank kept the accounts of these Venezuelan clients open even when their involvement in corruption cases had been exposed in the media. So basically they were totally out in the open. Like, they've been arrested, their corruption cases were being reported in the news, and Credit Suisse was still hiding their money for them. And so that's what led the DOJ and others to go seize the accounts, basically on behalf of Venezuela. This time frame, by the way, Matt, 2004, 2015 is the exact. If you go read the PDVSA lawsuit that Maduro filed in March 2018, that is the exact time frame that he accuses them of. He says the corruption occurred between 2004 and 2015 because once he comes to power, he realizes it's happening and he starts arresting people. So
yeah, I think that you've tied together a very strong analysis. Are you going to publish something as a standalone? I know a lot of these insights that you have come out in the briefs, but yeah, you're going to do a standalone, because I'd like to use your work on this as a resource, a resource-based to refer back to in a written form. So that would be a high-value weapon to utilize in battle. Good. All right. So let me guess. Egmont Group doesn't play a big role in any of this as far as like cracking down or identifying the corrupt lines. This is happening outside of the channels of this agency. I
haven't heard their name come up one time. Like, I haven't heard any of them.
Which is their whole like mandate and purpose.
Yes.
And they don't even play any role. Okay.
Bingo. Yeah. So they literally don't come up one single time. And this is all being figured out by basically like investigators, like citizen journalists, basically. Right. And then turned over. So this guy who's identified in this article, this is from 2022, is his name is Nervis Villalobos. That's his name. He is a PDVSA official who was arrested in Spain in 2018. And basically he's described as like the energy czar under Hugo Chavez and Maduro, who then had had to flee Venezuela because Maduro figured out what he was doing. He was like the guy who was on the PDVSA side, who was basically rigging all these contracts and helping embezzle all this money, right? And so I then go and read because up here it mentions that all this information is turned over to the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, which is a consortium of 47 different media outlets. I go and find their article from the same date because they're reporting on this, and look whose name comes up. Quote, he would drown your business if you did not pay him. To survive, you had to ally yourself with Nervis or whatever. Matthias Krull, a banker convicted in the U.S. for laundering PDVSA money, told Spanish prosecutors in a document obtained by OCCRP. So that's the guy who was arrested by the DOJ in July of 2018. He's the guy who was laundering all the money for these people from the banks, but also for the oil companies, but also for the cartel. And here he is giving Spanish prosecutors in a totally different jurisdiction all the information they need on these people. Like, oh yeah, Villalobos, yeah, I know who that guy is. Here's what he was all about. Like he was basically the pipe hitter who, if you didn't pay him, he would destroy you, right? He was like the thug in the PDVSA corrupt apparatus. So it's amazing, like, just to see like a name like that pop up in a totally, in an article that's published 4 years after he's arrested. That just goes to show that this guy is like cooperating with all these authorities and giving them the roadmap, even more of a roadmap than what Maduro had provided. And again, like to your point, Egmont Group doesn't come up at all. Like, I don't see them at all stepping in and saying, hey, we noticed some sketchy red flags here. So, it sounds like this whole thing is about to break open, because based on what Gustavo Petro and Trump are talking about, which is not being publicized at all right now by the White House, it is being publicized by Gustavo Petro, that they're basically going to start going after these people very publicly. They've already been going after them quietly for many years and arresting a lot of them, seizing their bank accounts, to the extent that one of the biggest Swiss banks in the world collapsed in 2023, and then the government forced their competitor to buy them out, right? Which led to a big flight of money out of the Swiss banking system, because the Saudis raised the red flag and said, this is bullshit. This is bullshit. This is not how banking is supposed to, and finance is supposed to work. You how did, like, we bought 10% of this bank, and then the bank collapses and we just lost all our money. This is not right. So yeah, I mean, this is like the lights coming on and the cockroaches scrambling, and I'm still kind of like piecing it all together, like in my head, but this narrative is becoming very clear to me that things are not what they seem. Trump is playing nice, so to speak, with a lot of these bad guys, but at the same time, these rat lines are being like hunted down and exposed. And then, of course, we now have the U.S. Senate publicly talking about all these 900 Nazi accounts that Credit Suisse was still holding on to 80 years later.
Yeah. Yeah. And just exposing Credit Suisse's role, both in terms of building up the Nazi war machine as a so-called neutral Swiss country, BS, right? I mean, and at the same time, overseeing all the financing and logistics for the rat lines into Latin America, Argentina, but all around Latin America after World War II. A lot of this stuff is also coming to the surface at the same time as this is being exposed. I think that that's extremely relevant, and it's created a foundation as well of thinking. Like, what I'd like to know now is the nation which has done the most aggressive anti-corruption crackdown and purge that I've seen so far has been China since 2012, and a lot of the foundations around which the purges have happened is around drug money laundering, corruption, utilizing surface state-run enterprises, some big ones too. The Chinese construction bank, the biggest international construction bank of China, was their top chief was arrested for using this agency as a way of circulating illicit monies abroad, not just for promoting. I mean, both for using it as a front for speculative enterprises, but also for international financial black market dealings. So I'd be curious if there's any evidence of collaboration. I wouldn't be surprised if there were, between the Chinese intelligentsia and patriots, with what you've just outlined here with Petro, and that speech that Petro delivered upon his return from meeting up with Trump is extremely relevant. That's super important. And how this entire, I mean, I'm not sure about UBS though, because UBS is still, in my mind, they seem to be playing in your analysis a slightly more positive role, or like.
Well, so here's what happens. So Credit Suisse hires this guy Borowski, and this Borowski guy is fascinating because I didn't know that. I went and looked into what he was, like what's his background. So Borowski is the guy who back in 2008, during the financial crisis, he was appointed to investigate the Troubled Asset Relief Program, the TARP program. And he's the guy who comes out in the Senate testimony and says, hey, this is actually like bullshit. and the U.S. taxpayers are getting screwed here, and there's no chance they're going to get that $3 trillion that we just handed to the bankers. We're never going to get that money back. Like, he's the one who raises the red flag. He's also appointed to investigate the $55 trillion credit default swap. That's the mortgage fraud scheme that causes the entire economy to collapse in 2008. Like, he investigates that, right? As part of the Southern District of New York, which is at the heart of all of these cases that Trump has brought, including, I think, the Epstein case, if I'm not mistaken. It was also Borowski before he was doing that, he was an assistant U.S. district attorney in New York, where he prosecuted 50 leaders of the Colombian military group FARC on narcotics charges and successfully argued one of the largest accounting fraud cases in history. So, and by the way, the FARC is like one of the main groups that Gustavo Petro has been fighting against ever since he came into office. So, point is that this Borowski guy is like probably as well read into the corrupt practices in our financial system as anybody, and its connection to the cartels. He's fired by Credit Suisse after being hired to run an internal investigation because they want to understand, what's going on with our bank accounts. Like, do we have any Nazi-linked bank accounts? And I guess what he brought back was so damning, they told him to chill out. He refused to chill out. They fire him. And then that information is passed along to the Senate hearing, like the Senate committee. And then the Senate committee gets involved, and they go to UBS and they say, hey, UBS, you're about to buy out, you're buying out Credit Suisse. We are actually, here's a letter. We're demanding that you reinstate Borowski and that you reappoint him. We want to report from this guy. So UBS then says, okay, we will rehire him. So they rehire him. They put him back in charge, and his report is due sometime in 2026. We're going to get so he was testifying, I guess, yesterday in the Senate to what he had found so far, but he's going to publish a full report sometime this year that's going to fully detail how this whole thing worked in Credit Suisse. So yeah, is UBS playing a positive role? I don't know if I'd say they're playing a positive role. Their hands are kind of tied. Like, they were forced by the Swiss government to purchase Credit Suisse. Yeah. And then basically the U.S. Senate is saying, we are demanding that you rehire this investigator and let him have access to everything. And I think what UBS is kind of saying is, all right, but these are not our accounts. This is Credit Suisse. We're UBS. So whatever he finds, is Credit Suisse. I think that's kind of like how they're playing it. But again, like, it's everyone kind of looking out for their own best interest, but the net effect of it all is going to be the whole banking system being kind of brought to its knees.
Seems that way, huh? Well, this has been a very enlightening episode, Gordon. I very much appreciate the work that you've done pulling this, all of these facts together in a solid narrative that gives us a lot of foundation around which we can hypothesize ever better going forward as we gather more information. And again, your instincts have been solid. The Egmont Group as well. I can't thank you enough for bringing that to my attention. I'm sure that's going to be a gift that's going to keep giving. So everybody listening right now, put it on your agenda, 2:00 Eastern time today. Gordon is going to take what you just heard and go even deeper into the weeds. So I'm really looking forward to watching not the live, but the recording of that. I'm going to take notes. I'm waiting for your essay to come out as well. Maybe a series. I don't know. Whatever it is, I'm going to like it and share it massively. So thank you.
Yes.
We do have to go. Unfortunately, it's hidden. Yeah, there's something I've got to do in 2 minutes. So thank you, everybody, for watching this week's episode of Breaking History, and we will see you again next
Enjoy
week.
Mexico.
All right. Thank you. All right. Talk to you later.
Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up on this video. And a special thank you to all of our advertising partners. Please remember to shift your dollars to support those businesses that support Badlands Media.